Life Stories Live.
Thank you for joining with me today. I always look forward to spending some time talking to you. And this day here, we're going to share your life story on our Life Stories Worldwide program, and just take the liberty of sharing whatever's on your heart. So, Joe, it's again a pleasure to have you as an active businessman with us today, sharing, encouraging us. Go ahead, Joe. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bill. It's an honor to be able to share. It's really God's story. I've walked it out, but more and more I see how He's the one who's been orchestrating my steps through a very strange and circuitous path through the kingdom, and to learn about our Father. But I would sum it up as saying I've been apprehended by His goodness. Is God continues even today to surprise me with his good plans. He's abounding in mercy. The Song of Moses sums it up. He's abounding in loving kindness and mercy towards all of us. And he's also, what he's done is he's opened my eyes to kind of observe the way that he has acted on my behalf, and kind of pulled me down the path in spite of my intentions or desires to go elsewhere. So I grew up in a home of faith, and I was actually, my mom wasn't planning on it, but I was the last of five. She was supposed to have her tubes tied before I was born, and the doctor wasn't able to perform the procedure. And 10 and a half months after my sister was born, here I came, and the chain smoking neighbor named Emmanuel drove her to the hospital, and she ended up dedicating me to the Lord on the delivery table. So what's happened in my life, I really look back and say, God's had His hand on the plans, and I'm thankful that she dedicated me to Him, because there's so many times that I tried to run away. But growing up in the church, I never really saw much life or excitement there. I definitely was wired up for adventure. And when my mom would remind me that she dedicated me to the Lord, I would say, well, I think He's calling me to football. But I kind of stopped growing in high school, played quarterback, and didn't think I was going to be big enough, had really small bones and would break them easily. So I went into the broadcasting field and started off I got to work with the Monday Night Football team and on the production side, but I really wanted to be in front of the camera. And the Lord, He was faithful. He gave me so many opportunities to meet famous people. I ended up living and working in Hollywood for a while, and getting into the TV and film industry as well. And one day I was getting ready to sign a lease with three other guys, roommates, and to kind of get after it, to transition from the media and broadcasting world to TV and film, and was getting an agent and going to be signing this lease. And instead of turning left out of the parking lot to sign a lease and stay in LA, I didn't know I was following the voice of God. I got this prompting to turn right, and I ended up getting on I-10 and driving all the way back to Florida, where I was raised, with all my stuff in my car. I was going to go sign a lease and move in. So we didn't have cell phones back then. So I didn't even get to inform the guys. I just was a no-show. But I think I saw, in a moment, I saw my future. And I knew that somehow I was going to do business and have a family, and doubling down in Hollywood didn't feel like the right thing. So God pulled me out of that. I ended up moving back to Florida and getting a career with Johnson & Johnson, and I got into the pharmaceutical industry and spent 5 years there. They paid for my MBA. I got to go to NYU, one of the best finance schools in the world. And right when I finished NYU, I was expecting, with my company paying for this big education, I was expecting a promotion, but I had gone through a broken relationship and just a ton of brokenness. Really hadn't been apprehended by God at that point. I just had religion. I didn't have relationship. And yet I knew that He had this calling on my life. But in that sitting there saying, I'm supposed to have this promotion, these guys paid for my education. And I remember one particular day I was really down, and I was in my sales territory in Brooklyn, and I violated the law by answering the cell phone call coming in when I was on the road. But it was my sister, who I didn't talk to very often. But she had visited me in New York the month before and shot a little video clip. This is going all the way back to 2004. Had shot a little video clip to send to The Apprentice. The Apprentice was #1 show on TV at the time, and sent it in. And so she asked me, say, hey, well, I know you're discouraged. What about The Apprentice? And they literally, as the #1 show on TV, with Donald Trump and everything else, there was 1 million applicants for The Apprentice that year. And I said, there's no way, Rachel, I was just so discouraged. And so everything was negative coming out of my mouth. And then the phone literally beeped. And I said, oh, hold on, let me get this call. And so I clicked over, and this lady said, hey, this is Lauren from The Apprentice. I'm on a train heading from Philadelphia to New York. Our team saw your video, and we want to meet privately with you tomorrow. And so they were having an open call in all these cities, and they had a line around the block. And I walked straight into the building, and they gave me a contract to be on the show. And, once again, I didn't know that this was God just apprehending me with his goodness out of a bad situation in New York, where I was really living a lifestyle of, just sin, self-pleasure. And I felt justified in it because of the broken relationship, and, was just seeking comfort in all the wrong places. But so he pulled me out of New York, and I ended up in LA for that process. And, what we weren't told is half of us were going on the show and half of us were going home. And so that week, spent a week in this hotel, had a personal coach, and, took all the psychological evaluation and everything else. And there was something that apparently made me not a fit for the show. I have some ideas of what that may be. But at the end of the week, they handed me a plane ticket to fly home. And I remember during that week.
Life Stories.
Feeling this sense that all of a sudden God was doing something, like it was supernatural, that I was getting plucked out of New York, as I was making plans to go get the big job in finance. I'd finished business school, and, to stay there and have this big life. And I got plucked out of that situation and brought to the West Coast. And I was like, I don't want to leave this place. I still have my job, and probably a promotion waiting for me with my, with Johnson & Johnson back on the East Coast. But I just felt like I was supposed to stay. So I didn't get on the flight to go home at the end of that week. And I knew that, gosh, I got to wake up, God's doing something here. and wanted to have integrity and wanted to make this change. I just didn't know how. And so I ended up not getting on the flight. I called a buddy who happened to live on the West Coast. I said, "Hey, long story. I couldn't tell anyone I'm here, but I was here for The Apprentice, and I'm supposed to fly home, but can you pick me up?" It was like 10 o'clock at night. So instead of getting on this red-eye flight, I'm with a college roommate and friend that night, kind of relaying to him all this story, going, and I don't have any language other, of I think God's doing something. He's not a believer. But in the next 2 days, I sign a lease, I get a job interview, and I have this new life on the West Coast. And very shortly after that, we get into investment banking with a new firm on the West Coast and meet my wife. And in those times, again, I knew, gosh, God, God's doing something. I need to wake up, and get out of this slumber of this lifestyle that is just very empty. I'm getting everything that the world would say: a nice car, place by the beach in Newport Beach, and great job, and was in this place in life, but I was totally empty inside. And I didn't know what to do about it, though. But I knew somehow, like, God is just so patient. And I knew that he was doing something. I just couldn't name it. So when I met my wife, I was like, it was one of those moments that I got to get serious. And so I was working at this investment bank and flying back and forth to New York. And at one particular day, I went into work. I'm engaged now to my wife to be, but I had the sense that, hey, I got to do something different. And pursuing money, everybody was making lots of money. It was like the boom days of like 2006. And I go into work, and I have this meeting, and we're sitting with the kind of the head of our department, and I've got this partner, and we're dividing up accounts, and you take this one, I take this one, is how I thought it would go. And he said, "Well, no, that one's mine, that one's mine." And so I'm like, well, hey, I don't have much left here to live off of. I'm trying to start a life and a family, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. So without even thinking about it, I just blurt out, "Hey, why don't you just announce that you're a selfish jerk, and you can take all the accounts and I'll just leave." I didn't say the word jerk, but that's what came out of my mouth unplanned. And next thing you know, I was shaking his hand and the other guy's hand, and I was without a job because he he made the declaration over himself. He got all the accounts, and I left with nothing. And that really led to, we ended up moving from California back east, led to this wilderness experience in my life where all those questions of, who is God? What's my faith? Why am I so low? I was 10 months between paychecks and getting married, and we were building a house off of some savings I had. So I worked through the savings, exhausted every possible connection to get a job on the East Coast, and just had nothing. And amidst all that, my wife introduced me to, we were just at a little function meeting some people, and, we're living in a new place. And she said, "You should talk to these guys." And I went in the next day. They were selling land for a developer. It was right before real estate tanked. And after all these job interviews and flying places, this guy just said, "Oh yeah, why don't you? Yeah, you can work for us." It was that simple. I just had to get my real estate license. So got into real estate at the worst time in 2007. But it broke this famine of paychecks. I was able to sell a couple pieces of land, and then very quickly, this entrepreneurial thing that was in my spirit just came alive. That, I can dream stuff up. And so when real estate went into a famine, I started to get blessed. We did this real estate development project, and it was all discovery for me. I felt like I stopped working at that point because I was just having fun, even though while the market was tanking. Went from one thing to kind of the next, and we ended up starting a real estate brokerage, and ended up finding a partner in Texas. And there, from that low point in my life, I start to see God once again apprehending me and bring me into this whole new world. We ended up, from this startup real estate company, over the next 5 years, we ended up becoming the #1 fastest growing real estate company in the nation, privately owned real estate company. And it was 100% him. He showed me a vision of just when I met my partner, he showed me a vision of something growing and going nationwide. And I just knew that in my spirit, didn't know how to do any of it. And he just took me through the steps through those years. But at the same time, he was doing an excavating work in me where I had hidden sin in my life that was a block to intimacy in our marriage. And we I had to come clean about that. Really I had a series of bottoms of not knowing how to be a married guy, not knowing how to be a good husband, and then becoming a father. And our daughter was born in 2009. And by 2012, my wife comes to me and said, we're pregnant with number 2. And we did this gender reveal. And she said, we discovered that he was going to be a boy. And we got a name in our spirit that his name is supposed to be Lucas. And so we named him Lucas. We got far along in the pregnancy, we got the room ready. And at this time, I had a lot of questions. We had this growing company, success by every worldly measure was starting to come, but I was just very, very empty inside. And we went into a routine appointment about 20 weeks, somewhere around there into the pregnancy. And we found out, and this is very common that people have to go through this. But we found out that his heart had stopped beating. And we went through this. God really met us. We went through this grieving process.
Life Stories Live.
And felt him come near to us. We actually saw some license plates on the drive home. And then we had to go through this grueling process to actually go to a Planned Parenthood for the DNC. And on the way there, we saw another license plate. The first one was Angel Above on the drive home. And then a week later, when we had to go in for the appointment, we saw a license plate that said In God's Hands. And so when we saw that plate, we were on I-15 driving in Rainbow. And I saw the sign Rainbow, next exit, when I saw that license plate. And something came into my spirit, like, God's orchestrating this. So I held my wife's hand. I said, I know this is so hard for you to go through, but like right now at our bottom, it's God's promise. Let's pray and ask for one of his, for him to redeem and restore the situation and use it for good. Lucas means bringer of light, that he would use this loss to bring light into our life. And I wasn't really walking with God. I really didn't know him, but I knew that he was once again apprehending us with his goodness, and just felt led to pray. So we had to go through that painful process of walking the thing out at the Planned Parenthood. And it was just horrific being in a place where, obviously, people are blind to what they're doing, and you want your baby and you're in the same place. And so we got through that process, and several months later, I had lost track of his due date. But I ended up at this Wild at Heart boot camp. John Eldredge had written a book, Wild at Heart, and I really didn't want to be there. I didn't think my wife would let me go to something to be away with guys for the weekend, but she encouraged me to go. And I probably had a chip on my shoulder, judging the guys. And by the end of throughout the weekend, the Spirit started stirring in me an awakening of a totally different story than I had ever heard. It started with the verse John 10:10, where it says, "The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come to give you life to the full," or the another translation, the abundant life. The Greek word is Zoe. And so as John is teaching on this verse, I'm sure I'd heard it before, but I'd never heard it before. And my birthday was 10:10. And so this thing really resonated with me. It's like he came to give us life. That what I had always heard was somehow, he had come, so we'd stop sinning, or it was just this very lame message that for some reason, that was just the lens through I saw things, a very old covenant lens that I had to get I was living under this pressure and guilt of sin, that I had to get my act together, and, that I had this wicked heart. But nowhere did I had discovered that he came to bring abundant life, and that abundant life wasn't this insurance ticket that I would get into heaven someday if I played my cards right or said a prayer, but that he wanted to bring me abundant life now, that he had a fuller life for me now. And so as that promise really awakened in my spirit, doing these activities with the guys, I was play football, and this guy ends up falling on me, and I thought I broke my back. I couldn't move, but I was in the middle of this boot camp where God was doing something. I was like, don't take me to the hospital. Like, I need to finish this weekend. And so by Sunday, I was in all sorts of pain. Someone had given me a painkiller. I had taken, someone heard me like groaning in the middle of the night, so they gave me like Advil PM, and I had to have all this coffee to try to wake up because of the Advil PM and this painkiller. And I was in some sort of like bizarro world as I'm listening to this message, and it was all on sonship. And the long and short of it is the sonship message finishes, and this, if anybody needs prayer, stay behind. I didn't even hear anybody say that. I was just wrecked by whatever God was doing, and also in this kind of semi-comatose kind of odd place. And so everybody gets up and leaves, and I'm physically just sitting there. I physically can't get up out of my chair. And this guy comes over to me, and fireman, he comes over and he just starts praying for me. And all my years of Christianity, I had never had someone pray on behalf of, I feel like Father is saying this. I had never experienced that. And he just said, I feel like Father's saying, I'm proud of you. And just that simple statement, and the thought of the fact that he was different than what I thought, because the God that I thought I was pursuing, or that I'd studied the word and everything, the lens through I saw it through was this lens of condemnation or conviction, because I knew that I was not obeying his commandments. And the thought that he could possibly be proud of me, or that he was outside of time and viewing me from a different lens through I could possibly see myself. And that just that little bit of opening in my heart to say, am I going to let this in, that this could possibly be Father God saying that I'm proud of you, when there was nothing that I was proud of in my own life as a father, as a husband, as a businessman. And I felt this guard around my heart, just the slightest bit open up. And next thing, to receive that word, that it could be from Father. And in all the unfathered places in me, all the things I was missing, and looking for the world to fill, all the places I've been searching all those years, trying to live out adventures and travel and business and risk and gambling and you name it, women, and every place I had tried to get the answers, wealth, ringing up empty. And here, this sense of acceptance and love just hit me. And so I ended up on the ground, in tears, just a mess. And the guys literally have to pick me up and drive my car and take me to the ER, because I'm, my back's really messed up. And so they drive me down the mountain, get me to the ER. My wife meets me there later. They give me a stronger painkiller.